Okay, so the idea of this roundtable is to discuss food security. So I would like to ask my colleagues in the context of this Cabana meeting and the increasing amount of genomic data, both for plants and pathogens and viruses and so, how can we do a better job in Latin America? If you notice in the presentation from CIMIT about all these environmental GWAS analysis that they are doing, he mentioned that they are collaborating with Cornell, with the John Isner Center, with the University of California, but not with Latin American laboratories. I think there is already people trained and the capacity to participate in this project. So what can we do to really be more important players in these processes, both at international centers and national institutions?
Yeah, I guess a lot depends on funding opportunities, right? And having the right funding opportunities to be able to contribute to that kind of projects. And I think that's why often they look for the collaborators that are in the more richer countries who are investing more in science, because they can get access to different kinds of funds and things like that. And it's very difficult to influence that, right? But it's one of the things that we're trying to do through Cabana, to raise awareness about these kind of issues that there needs to be investment in science. And I think it's changing in some countries slowly. I don't know how it is in Mexico, but at least in Peru, I've seen that that there's been more investment in science over the 18 years that I've been there, at least. Much more opportunities, especially for local and national programs.
I agree that funding is one of the problems, but I think that organization is another problem, because sequencing costs are going down and computers are not so expensive. I mean, if you compare the cost of personnel in Cornell or the UK, you can have 10 people working in Latin America for one on the other side. So I think cost is quite different. So is there any problem of organization and sharing
data? If I could make a couple of observations. I'm detecting a little bit of echo. I hope it's not deafening you all. One is, I think in Latin America, we need better mechanisms for transnational collaboration. As you've already pointed out, Luis, a lot of the collaborations are bilateral between a Latin American country and a European country or the US. And so I think the governments, perhaps the foreign ministries, need to collaborate more on enabling this mobility between Latin American countries and some pan-Latin American collaborations. And the second thing is, I would just urge you all to believe in yourselves. I mean, you know, the quality of science that we've seen over the last 2 days is incredible. And the resourcefulness that I have seen throughout the Cabana project is incredible. And you deserve to be on a global stage. And I just, you know, part of this is pushing yourselves, to do that. Because the world is asking for this now. It needs your involvement in these large, major international projects. And if you're willing to push and put yourselves forwards, I think the money will have to come, because you know, there are some major global challenges: food security, protection of biodiversity, global health, that rely on you.
Thank you very much. I think many things that were already said. I mean, that we have to rely on us. And I think it's also like a matter of working in team, right? That's sometimes something that Sophia also mentioned, that we are sometimes rewarding just the individual efforts and also wanting to have all the lights on us, and instead of collaborating. And I think this is something that has to change dramatically, that we can start collaborating more within our own communities, and then of course with other communities in Latin America. I think the willingness is there, and of course now is the resources that sometimes are limited, that probably many of us think we have so few that we have to cover it. And instead of sharing and looking actually in the communities, in the microbial communities, when there are less resources, it's when they start to collaborate more. So when there are many resources, there are less collaboration in microbial communities. So probably it's a lesson that we can take. And when we have less, we can be more creative. And of course, I think it's important to reinforce all the attitudes and that reinforce teamwork and mutualism. So I would say this is something very important. And I think it's really in the last web of knowledge, like Latin American always are collaborating with someone else. And I think it's a lot of because of the funding, but we have to change it just by talking to each other and looking for ways to come up with common goals, I guess.
And I think it's critical, right? The collaboration inside Latin America. That's very, it's uncommon. It's becoming more common, but it's traditionally very uncommon because we always look for partners that have a lot of money, right? And we don't talk much about it between each other. So I think that's a really key point that's going to make us stronger if we can collaborate more and we can communicate more between inside Latin America. And another point that I think is critical is the involvement of industry, right, in Latin America, which is not traditionally done, right? The industry doesn't involve very much with scientists in Latin America, which it's something that happens in other countries. So that's also something critical, I think, because we don't have that much. They can contribute a lot with funds, and as we've seen from early talks, we do have the advantage of having a lot of biodiversity and a lot of the answers to the challenges that we are going to face are in this biodiversity and how we use it, and we are not exploiting this biodiversity that much. We see other teams, other countries that come and harness this biodiversity, and we are not doing that enough ourselves. So I think that's a key point as well.
I think, Luis, in the case they mentioned from CIMMYT was particularly for wheat. And I don't know, besides Mexico, what other Latin American country has, like, with this an important crop. I think Colombia, we grow very little wheat. So but I don't know what was their participation in like world market. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, and I'm saying this because for example, we have had a lot of collaboration with maize, and I think almost all seeds that come to Colombia to grow maize come first from Mexico. So, but I mean, it was just the case I was going to raise about wheat, but yeah, you might be right. Other countries should have a point in contributing to CIMMYT research as well. So yeah.
You need a microphone there.
So many years ago, we had a chief scientific officer in the UK, Sir John Beddington, and he talked a lot about the perfect storm, which was the sort of the challenges of food security, water, and the dependence on hydrocarbon. And he argued that there were about 50 days worth of food surplus around the world at any time. And he was basically saying that, give or take 10 days, most of the food is out at the surplus is out at sea, going from one country to the other, and that's basically our warehousing. So he might have been a little bit inaccurate in the number of days, but you know, the global food supply is pretty tight. So the question is, are there any unifying statements that come out of Latin America regarding food security? Are there any specific themes that could, you know, specific messages that the Latin American countries could unite against or unite behind, or is it just too complicated?
If I could propose one as an outside observer, the tremendous biodiversity and the genomic richness that is going to uphold our food security for the future. I think that's one thing that the whole of Latin America could get behind, and we've seen many beautiful examples of that today.
Yeah, my guess that the unifying point is biodiversity. We have 60% of the world's biodiversity in Latin America, and it's actually centered in a few countries. It's not all Latin America. So that gives us a competitive advantage. So the problem is, how can we politically and scientifically get organized to work together? I think there are complementary expertises and complementary efforts that if you join tasks, we could do a much better work. But I don't know why it's so difficult. It's a lot easier to collaborate with an American or a European than with a Latin American. I don't know why is that. We are very jealous or something. I don't know. Yeah, this is.
But I'm also thinking that, you know, in this meeting we've had several representatives from international treaty organizations. One of those is the CG cluster of organizations, and the other one is EMBL, and these are both examples of organizations where the governments of a number of member states have come together to fund something that's worthwhile. And I wonder whether there is some value in lobbying the science ministries to consider, you know, if you like, a molecular life sciences, a sort of, you know, an EMBL for Latin America, if you like, or you know, perhaps something that's more focused on the grand challenges, but you know, a pan-Latin American initiative to get behind genomics or get behind pathogen surveillance, whether that's in humans or whether it's for food security, because they're potentially a relatively small contribution from each country could be much greater than the sum of its parts. I'm being very idealistic here, of course, but these ideas have to be thrown around sometimes.
Yeah, I think another issue that is related with this problem is that we don't, my belief is we don't have a very important, or we are not very well represented, the scientific community within the governments, right? In Latin America, it's a very vertical organization, and it's hard for us to, or we don't do it enough, right, to communicate with the higher authorities and really come up with coordinating plans. But maybe if we do this ourselves in Latin America and we come up with a strong organization, and then we can probably make some fuss, right? And make our the governments hear us. Yeah, I think that's also an issue.
I think that does change a bit last year with bioinformatics, because a couple of Latin people were elected, like in the board of directors of ISCB, which is the International Society for Computational Biology, and so we have a good representation there. But yeah, you are right. In other scientific communities, we are like non-existent. So it's hard to make a point about our problems, and yeah.
Yeah, like a very practical example is like sequencing costs, right? Sequencing here in Mexico, for example, it's really expensive because we pay a lot of taxes, import taxes. So we end up sequencing everything outside, and then we don't control really our genetic resources well, right? So, for example, in Brazil, the scientists don't pay any taxes for importing a lot of reagents. So it's not more expensive to do it in Brazil than in the US. And I think this helps a lot. This can give these policies can give a lot of impulse to increase our sequencing capacity and to build our resources. And this is going to require us to talk with the government and try them to make these policies happen.
I wanted to make a comment out of my own experience. Some years ago, I had the experience of working with beans, with common beans. And it was an international project. It was promoted by CITED. That's an organization which is for technological advance in Latin America, that was at the moment led by people in Spain. And it involved 4 countries in Latin America and Spain. And it worked perfect. And we got good money everywhere. And the whole point is that we had to do a lot of lobbying with the politicians, a lot. I mean, I never traveled so much in my life to go around and convince people. So it can be done, but you have to be convinced that you want to do it. And yes, you need a little help. A little help from my friends is needed. Yeah. And in that case was CITED. So they, in a way, coordinated, facilitated the bringing us together with a very specific objective. And at the time they call it the cited genome project. So they wanted to have an emblematic project. And that was the will behind this, the driving force of it. And they just made us come closer to the politicians in our own countries that otherwise we could not reach. And then talking to them, we convince them. And I think that's a way to go. But unfortunately, we need a foreign force to bring us to these politicians so that we are taking into account.
Thank you. I would like to add to the comment from Alfredo and also what you just said. It is true, we need to get closer to the government, we need to get closer to the politicians, but every time we sit here in our meetings or in our lab or in our conferences, and so we say yes and we do not do anything. So it is really time to move on, to do it, to make it happen, because otherwise everybody else will be sitting on the same seat and nobody will move anything. Here now in Mexico, we have a wonderful opportunity to make our voice be heard, because our new law of science and technology will be discussed in Congress. We need to bring forward our ideas, what we believe that is wrong and what we believe it is right, but we cannot do it sitting down in our lab. We also need a new law that exempts some taxes from what everything that we import and is being used in research. Otherwise, we will still be paying so much of the money that the government gives us. They give us 1 peso, but really we can only use about like 30 cents. Maybe because we have the import taxes, we have to pay the longest line of things. But if we don't raise our voice, and this is especially for the young people, for the new generations, because I have raised my voice. If you want, I can help you get to the politicians, but you have to do it too, because as much as I scream, it's one voice and I need a little help of my friends. So we need to move really, and not only bring out the ideas, but to act. Thank you.
We will do it, but we need to coordinate. We need to coordinate because there is not a Latin American organization. There is not an Academy of Latin America. There is not the Biology Society of Latin America. There are a few, but not really. We have failed to even produce a Latin American journal. We all complain that we are discriminated in journals that are published in Europe or United States, but we never came together and said, okay, let's get our best papers in a Latin American journal so that we can have a better equal treatment. So I agree, we have to be more active and to talk to other colleagues in different countries, because we all have similar problems in terms of funding, in terms of organization, and so on.
If I can add to that, like we were discussing yesterday at lunch with Guy Cochrane here and some others and Alfredo Herrera, that and this is something I really saw very clearly from the Cabana project, like the difficulty of moving money, for example, like if you get funding and if you really want to have a Latin American collaboration, like even getting people here today, it was quite difficult depending on which country you were. Like some countries had difficulties for some things and some others for other things. So I really think having an entity that's either a foundation or an NGO or something like that, that enables, because at the end, I mean, you can say you're collaborating on a lot of things, but if you get a big grant, you need to pay for stuff. So just having the potential to move money and people around really could empower such endeavors, in my opinion. Like, I know it would be very difficult probably, but I feel like this could provide some stability in given the changing climate, political climate in Latin America. But that's just, yeah, I'm not sure how to go about doing one, but I think it could be very useful.
Yeah, I think this is one of the common themes of all of the GCRF Grow projects, actually. I know from the little bit I learned about the Crick Africa network, for example, that they were having exactly the same problems as us. So I think, from at least the perspective of the UK working with low and middle income countries, there's a set of learnings around that we should be able to get something useful out of. Of course, that doesn't help when you multiply those transnational efforts from every country to every other country. But we certainly were not alone in Cabana in having these problems.
Yeah, it's also important. The exchange of materials has become increasingly difficult. Mexico, for instance, is becoming very difficult even for us to access our own genetic diversity. It's complicated, much more so if we want to send it abroad. So we need to somehow find a way to harmonize the mechanism to exchange genetic resources. And I understand that people say, oh, these crops or these genetic diversity has been preserved for the past 50,000 years by our indigenous people. So whatever comes out of them, we have to give them back something. But we need to find a way to do it in a legal way and in a way that everybody benefits from the information. But that could be a major constraint in the future. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I think in the case of Colombia, we have helped a lot the scientists, and now we have come together a little bit better. I would say that in the past and in many countries in our talks with the politicians, with the government. Now we have a Ministry of Science, which we didn't have before. And I think from my point of view, things have improved a lot. Now we have a couple of senators, I would say more than a couple, few senators that really are concerned about science, talk about science, fight for science, which again, we didn't have before. And also in the case of the access to genetic resources is being constructed by scientists and lawmakers from the government. So right now it's not an ideal situation yet, but at least we have a law. At least we know how to contact the government if we want to get material. So I will say we have gone a way of improving what we have. Is again, it's not ideal, but I would say for Colombian scientists we are almost there, in the sense that the government have facilitated access to genetic resources for Colombian scientists. So I don't know cases in other countries, to tell you the truth, but that's our case in Colombia, at least for the time being.
Thank you. From a non-scientific point of view, how can the society be involved in the process of food security?
I think it's something very important to start to be more democratic, right? Like if we make more contact with local governments, they could also ask the producers and the people in the fields that participate also in the decisions. So up to now, we don't have such a democratic process. So every party is disintegrated, right? Well, most of the times. So we don't know exactly what the people really need. Well, for example, today in the morning, we saw that they start with some encuestas, or asking the people what are the major problems in their fields. So, okay, this is one of the things, but we have to make processes that really put the people together to work together, scientists, and I think also the producers and the society in general, right? Because, for example, the acceptance or not acceptance of GMOs or different technologies sometimes is because they don't know how they work as well. So if they don't know how they work, they will not accept them in the very first place. So I think it's a lot of dialogue to be done. And it's not only with the government, but also with the society and the local producers. And I think this is something that I think is the most important, to start probably with the locals and then to try to make connections with some other places in Latin America. So this will be the way I should suggest, because it's easier probably to start with your own community, build some capacities, and then also continue growing them upper in different countries. And trying to, I think it's quite challenging. We are not really very well. We don't talk to sometimes to many people, right? I think the scientists, they look like they are in their own world, and sometimes we have also to make more efforts to share and to also accept the other people's knowledge and necessities, and to be open to them.
I think society will play a major role in food security and sustainability. We all need to participate, and people needs information and education to really participate, because from what we produce to what we consume, we all impact food security and sustainability. So we will all need to participate, and for that, the governments have a major role in providing information and education from the producers to the consumer, and we need to participate. Any last words?
No, I think we have discussed these 2 days in lunch and in the sessions about the problem of science communication, and I think we have to learn from the epidemiologists, who somehow are scientists as well, because they had to change the way of how they communicated quite fast during the pandemic. So they could be called by the media and they could reach people, and they really had to come up with a way of communicating about vaccines, about all the things that were involved in the pandemic. For us, it's been more difficult for some reason, as you say, like for example with GMOs, of trying to reach people and come up with this technology that really is the solution for many of our problems for food security. It's going to be the solution for many problems. So how to do it in these many years that GMOs have been in the market, and still there's most people don't want to hear about them. I don't know how to do it, but we have to somehow find a way of communicating that to the society. So that's a challenge, but I think we can do it at the end.
So we came up here because we want to thank you all for being with us here this couple of intense days. We want to thank our Cabana partners, our European UK EBI partners also, and friends, especially Kat is approaching midnight over there and she's still here with us. And I think that shows commitment. And she'll be in Cartagena with us also virtually. So thank you very much, Kat. And thank you for all the people who attended the conference. I hope you learned a lot today. I think different aspects. It's something perhaps slightly different of what we are used to listen to. We are normally listening more strictly scientific talks without too many things about the politics or the networking that is necessary to carry out science. And I want to thank also the team who helps us here to organize, starting over here with the headphones still there. Thank you, Jesse, for helping us with everything here inside. And of course, the girls over there that were helping us all the time. Not only during these 2 days, and there is also Hussein here and other people from Selene's group, and in the cabina there's somebody else helping us. And I think it has been a very great effort, and we are very grateful. I think we had a fantastic event, and I will invite the speakers also. Thank you very much for coming and for taking the time and supporting this effort. Let's hope Cabana goes on the second phase, and we can start increasing this network in size. And Selene, you want to say?
Well, just you said most of it. So thank you very much, everybody, for making this happen. And it was a pleasure to host you here and hear everything, or speakers, and have all the discussions we had. Thank you so much. And if you want to visit the talks, they're all recorded on the Langevio's Facebook, and they would be uploaded to YouTube. So if any of you want to share it afterwards or just mull over some of the aspects, you can do that. Thank you so much.
So thanks to everyone and have a good afternoon. Thank you.
We are done.